What is up, Pitcher List family? I'm Brett Ford, joined by Scott Chu. We're here talking hitters on Pitcher List. It's another episode of Hacks and Jacks. Scott, we actually had some nice weather in upstate New York. How are things out in Michigan?
Warm and rainy. Just got a little flood warning. No big deal.
If you don't like the weather in March, just wait a minute, right?
Just classic, Oh
The old
well, what are you gonna do?
the old fake spring coming at us. We hit 70 degrees today in Binghamton, and um, nobody knew what to do. People were going crazy.
I have a 70-year-old house, so water from the sky is the bane of my existence.
That sounds about right. Yeah, ours is creeping up there too. And if we can avoid, the between the melted snow and the rain and everything else, um, we're feeling a little damp as well. So, let's get into some hitters here. We've got a lot to talk about. It's draft season, and World Baseball Classic season. There's injury news, a lot to talk about here in news and notes. Let's jump right into our injury and we'll call it transactional news. I guess really the lead here is Jurickson Profar caught with PEDs for a second time in his career, suspended 162 games. That leaves the Atlanta outfield pretty thin. Obviously, Ronald Acuna, Michael Harris, and then Mike Yastrzemski. There's really
Your
not a ton of
boy.
outfield depth in Atlanta. What does the Profar suspension mean for fantasy managers?
Oh, so it does a couple of things. Number one, I think it bumps a guy like Michael Harris up in the lineup just a little bit, right? So like right now he's projected to bat seventh. If Albies or Yastrzemski slow, he can creep up there a little further. Just it's one more guy who is going to be in the top part of the lineup that's now lower. Drake Baldwin now projected to bat second. That's another big jump for him. More plate appearances. Like he's also going to DH some, I think. It technically right now, Dominic Smith is the guy who looks like he's coming in, that a guy who didn't have plate appearances before that looks like he might now. And we've seen Dominic Smith for what feels like an age. He's been around ever since he was with, the Mets. There's always this like push where people like this guy could be really interesting, right? They're always like, oh yeah, he he has on base skills and whatever. He's never been interesting. All right. He was interesting in 2019 and 2020. And since then, even when given a full opportunity, he's never been interesting. So I don't think there's a whole lot of chance that they find someone else. I think guys like Jorge Mateo and Eli White will get more time here and there for Atlanta, but none of them are really fantasy relevant. The only real mover here is Mike Yastrzemski's a little bit more interesting, I guess, as like a back end outfielder. The skills still limit him quite a bit. Like he's not a guy that I'm like, oh, you got to go pick him up. He's like a 15 team league now. He's a lot more interesting. And, guys like Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies moved up the lineup just a little bit. So they'll get an extra like 50 plate appearances this year. Well, not even that. It'll probably be more like 25 to 30, but they'll be there.
Yeah, and Atlanta just seems cursed this preseason with all the injuries to their pitching staff, all the injuries, the suspension now. The Braves are having a tough time this spring training, and we'll see how that translates to the regular season. We know that they were supposed to be one of the threats in the NL East, and see if they can hang on to that. Speaking of the NL East, we move over to Philadelphia, where another outfielder was caught with PEDs. Johan Rojas, the Phillies outfielder, 80-game suspension for PEDs. Does that open the door for Justin Crawford? And what else in Philly might that affect?
It doesn't open the door for Justin Crawford because it was already open. I thought he was already there. Justin Crawford is definitely going to be the center. It's now just like super confirmed. Justin Crawford is the starting out center fielder. He's going to bat ninth. He's got a bunch of speed. He should be pretty good for OBP and stolen bases. And I don't think you'll get a whole lot else. That's just not his game. The ground balls can be a little concerning for Justin Crawford. He hits a bunch of them and he hit a bunch of them in the minors. So gets to the major leagues. That's going to be a little bit of a concern. but he takes his walks. He'll get his steals, a bit of a rabbit there. As for the rest of the roster, it really does very little, right? Like Brandon Marsh was already probably going to be a platoon guy. Didn't really matter. It's, this team is just going to kind of keep moving on. I don't think in fantasy we cared that much about Johan Rojas other than maybe he was in the way for Justin Crawford and now he ain't. So that's about it for him.
The corpses of Dylan Moore and Brian De La Cruz are there as depth bats in Philly, but I mean, that's pretty irrelevant for fantasy managers.
Yeah, none of them have any real. Justin Crawford only loses his role if he's really, really bad, because I think he'll be good enough defensively and walk enough to justify as a number 9 hitter with speed.
Well, let's move on to Houston, where shortstop Jeremy Pena has a finger injury. I think it was a sprain or something ligamental.
Fractured his fingertip.
Fractured his finger. So Carlos Correa is taking reps at shortstop. Does this open a path for Isaac Paredes to get some at-bats in Houston finally?
Maybe. The only problem is there's like no timeline on this, right? Like, and the timelines we do know are he might miss opening day, right? So like maybe it opens up a week or two. It doesn't. So actually, I will talk about it a little bit more later. I just updated my ranks and Jeremy Pena doesn't move. Even though he's potential to miss a week or two of opening day, he finished as a top 70 hitter last year with 125 games, right? And I rank him 74th. So it's like, okay, well, take off 10 games off the top. And I think he can still very much be this same guy that I was expecting. So I'm not super concerned. Again, we don't have any kind of timeline. If it does open up some time for Isaac Paredes, that's awesome. But I just don't know that it will. I think, if you project Pena to hit the injury list or hit the IL to start the year, then yes, Paredes steps into third base and probably hits right in the heart of the order, which is what we want anyway. So that can totally happen. And if that's the case, yeah, but it's short term, right? Because when Pena's back, he's an excellent defender. Isaac Paredes' real path is probably either someone else probably has to get hurt more, or this team has to have some kind of desire to put Yordan Alvarez in the outfield. And I just don't think they do.
Well, speaking of outfielders, Chandler Simpson, another rabbit. I know we talked about Justin Crawford being a little bit of a rabbit. Chandler Simpson hasn't seen the field in almost a week for the Rays as they nurse what looks to be a hamstring injury for Simpson. And obviously hamstrings, speaking from a football perspective, hamstrings tend to linger, especially for guys that are reliant on their speed. Is this something that concerns you as draft season creeps up on us?
Not really. I think he's meant to be getting into games again. I don't remember if he was in today or not, but this doesn't sound like a long-term thing. This is more of just hey, as you said, we don't want this to get any worse. So we're going to give him a little bit of time. My concerns with Chandler Simpson are much more about his actual ability, right? Like, I get it. He hit 295 last season and he can steal a bunch of bases, but he's just so awful against left-handed pitching that in fantasy, okay, so we have this guy who can steal a base every other game, right? He stole famously 104 bases in 110 games in 2024, right? So this guy with amazing speed and good average, that's 2 categories. But he only, I don't see how he plays 120 games, right? This is a part-time hitter for the Rays who already platoon guys. They're definitely going to platoon a guy who doesn't really seem to be able to hit left, same-sided pitching. And it's a little harder to steal on lefties because they're staring at you at first base. So I don't think they have a ton of incentive to do that. That's why he doesn't rank higher. I think there was a dream that he would rank higher as like a true rabbit, but that storyline never plays out, right? Billy Hamilton, that storyline didn't play out, right? They're like, oh, well, you got to take him early because he's going to win the stolen base category for you. It turns out when you're so bad at the other categories, nobody cares. Nobody really cares. Like, if you were an everyday player and leading off for them, then maybe. But even then, I don't see how he'd ever lead off against, I don't see how Chandler Simpson would ever lead off against left-handed pitching. I don't see, and even against right-handed pitching, I don't know if he'll lead off then either, right? This team has a couple other guys who can play that role. Yandy Diaz can do it. Gavin Lux is a sort of a scrappy hitter. Jake Fraley has done that a little bit before earlier in his career. He's a guy who can take walks. Just because his average is a lot better, his OBP is not, right? Like Gavin Lux and Yandy Diaz are guys that can sport like a 350 OBP and up. Chandler Simpson can't. He just doesn't walk. So he's a tough guy. I'm not so worried about the injury. I'm far more worried about the role.
We'll talk about another outfielder who we're way more hyped on, who does steal bases, but also contributes to a lot more categories than that. And that's Arizona Diamondbacks outfielder Corbin Carroll. He looks like he might make his his Arizona spring training debut out in the Cactus League. He's a guy, one of those Hammate injuries that we talked about early in the year. It looks like he might not miss any time in the regular season if all things go well. That's a huge boost for anyone who got a draft discount on Corbin Carroll immediately after the Hammate bone injury. And obviously he's a stud, and we're very excited to see him hit and play for as many games as he can this year.
Yeah, and him and Francisco Lindor, two guys that had the Hammate issues and no other issues, right? They're the ones where it's like, I didn't really move them in my ranks because until I get bad news, I'm not going to, because the projected prognosis was they could be ready for opening day or at least opening week, right? Maybe they're not playing every single day right out of the gate. Maybe they miss a game or two, but that doesn't change my rankings at all, right? What's that? Like 0.6% of their season they might miss. I'm just not that concerned about it. So I'm absolutely, if you haven't drafted yet, I think Corbin Carroll goes right back to where he was, right on your, like, I don't think his projection really should be changed. Like right now, some of the projections have him down to like 138 games, 140 games. Although that might be fair just because he also has dealt with other injuries before, but Corbin Carroll should go right back into your rankings where you thought. I think the only Hammate bone guy that we're a little bit worried about would be Jackson Holliday, who is also progressing. He doesn't seem to be quite as far as Carroll. So Carroll is ready to get into spring training games. Jackson Holliday is not, but he is taking batting practice. He's, hit off a tee, things like that. I think what's killing me on Jackson Holliday is why are we so much harder on his injury than the other two? I don't know that I've seen something that indicates he is in so much worse of a position that projections have him at like 100 games. They've been missing 50 games. I haven't seen the evidence for that. I think the price has gone way, way, way too low. And I think he's just at the back end of my top 150 right now. There's risk for him, but it's not related to the injury. It's just related to him. He had a rough second half last season. He finished, barely, he finished his hitter 124. So there was some issues there, but I just don't understand why this price is so low and why he keeps falling and falling in drafts. And I'm scooping him up so late.
You and me both, as one of the many Orioles fans that we have here on Pitcher List. He's a guy that I'm targeting because I'm very excited about him this season. And it's a homer pick, but it's also, I think, a relatively sharp pick as well, especially if he keeps getting a Hammate bone discount. I'll happily scoop him up in drafts. Last transaction we'll talk about, and this could be completely irrelevant. Starling Marte signs with the Royals in their outfield. Are you worried? Obviously, Starling Marte doesn't have much fantasy relevance. He won't have much fantasy relevance, but does this concern you at all for, Kansas City's other outfielders, Jac Cagalione, Isaac Collins, and Kyle Isbell is fantasy irrelevant also, but especially for Cagalione, is this something that you're worried about? Perhaps him losing at bats to the 37-year-old Marte?
It's not because of Marte. Like, Marte is a guy. If it wasn't Marte, it would have been Lane Thomas on the bench, right? Or Tyler Tolbert on the bench, or just any right-handed guy that they decided would be, that they'd be comfortable with in right field to hit against a lefty. Jac Cagalianone's issue is with it. It's all himself. He's going to lose playing time because of him and who he is, and struggles against left-handed pitching. I think this team would love for him to be the everyday guy, but out the gate, he might get, the kid gloves on against tougher lefties. I think the Royals definitely think that they can compete in what is, frankly, a weak division, right? So it's not as though they're just going to be like, yeah, just plug him in and see what happens. It's not like we're going anywhere. Like, they might be the best team in this division, right? The Guardians, Tigers, Royals, none of them jump off the page. So could Cagalione have, platoon losses off the gate? Maybe, yeah, but not because of Starling Marte. Starling Marte is a pinch runner who's going to come in late in games. He's 37 years old. He hasn't, he actually wasn't a terrible hitter last season when he played. He played 98 games, a 112 WRC plus. He doesn't run nearly like he used to in terms of stolen bases, but he can still hit for average. He doesn't strike out a ton. He's a perfectly capable back end outfielder, like a team's fourth or fifth outfielder. And that's all he's going to be. Again, Caglianone's playing time has nothing to do with Marte and everything to do with his success against left-handed pitching.
Fair enough. We'll stay in the AL Central for one more note that came across my desk a little bit earlier this week. Kevin McGonigle survives the most recent wave of cuts in Detroit. He stays on the major league roster at least for another few days or week. What kind of optimism does that give you for him potentially making the Tigers opening day roster?
So much optimism. Kevin McGonigle might be this team's starting shortstop. They don't have one, right? Who's it going to be? Javi? Like Matt Vierling? Like, they don't have, like, Zach McKinstry was the other guy. They don't have a shortstop. Kevin McGonigle is a short. Like, to be fair, Zach McKinstry has played well when he was a shortstop. Nothing wrong with his defense, and he can play a little bit, but this team wants McGonigle to be the guy. I think he very well could be the guy. This is a top 5 overall prospect. I got to talk on the Detroit, I got to talk with some guys from Detroit, Evan Petzold, beat writer, about this team and how this works. And with McGonigle, the biggest thing is, can he unlock the power at the big league level, right? So he can hit fly balls. He can do all those things. But mostly he's like a line drive hitter. He's hit a bunch of them. I mean, right out of the gate, McGonigle is going to be a points league and OBP league guy. Like, he should start for you because he walks a ton. He walks more than he strikes out. He's actually done that his entire major league career, right? I mean, all the way back in the complex league back in 2023, when he was 18 years old, he was walking twice as much as he struck out, right? Like, he has truly, it's hyperbolic always, but he has Juan Soto level plate discipline. That's the level of plate discipline this guy is bringing to the table, right? I mean, he walks significantly more than he strikes out. What he doesn't have is that level of, I don't know if he has that level of home run power. Now, he did hit 19 home runs in 88 games last year. And the first caveat that I'll always make, even guys I like, he doesn't have a ton of time in Double-A. He's got more than like Cam Smith did last year, where he's got 206 plate appearances in Double-A, which is at least the upper minors. So McGonigle, I do think right out of the gate, he could be 20 home runs, 10 steals with a decent average and a good OBP. I think that is absolutely reasonable. I think that the next time I update the ranks, he'll be in the top 150. But yeah, he's got a little bit of speed. I know he can give you ratios right away. The question will be, how often can he get the ball in the air? This is something that up until last year, he had really struggled with. So in the low minors, it was tons of line drives. And then last season, as he moved to the upper minors, he was able to get the ball in the air just a little bit more. Comerica Park is big. Line drives aren't going to leave that park. right? He's going to have to get the ball in the air. That is hard to do against major league pitching. You tend to see guys hit more grounders, but for him, that might just be line drives, which will limit the home run power, but it'll help his ratios a ton. You should be very excited about Kevin McGonigle. This guy's an absolute stud. We talk more about Konnor Griffin because Konnor Griffin's like that 1-1 prospect who is probably like a slightly higher level of long-term potential because he's got more power. But if McGonigle opens the season with the Tigers, I think he's a rookie of the year contender for sure, if not the favorite until we know when Konnor Griffin has a chance to play.
Beautiful. And that's Kevin McGonigle from the Detroit Tigers, middle infielder. Is he listed? Is he eligible at shortstop right now, or is he eligible at second base in most formats?
I believe he's eligible at second base in most formats. Every league, like all these formats, have a slightly different way they handle what to do. So actually, no, he should be shortstop out of the gate. That's what he played mostly in 2025. They'll probably only have that shortstop designation. And frankly, with the Tigers, I don't see him getting a different one. I think they're hoping he just is the shortstop.
Excellent. Well, like I said, Kevin McGonigle, Detroit Tigers, name to watch for certainly as spring training continues to roll. We'll take a quick break, and we come back. We'll talk Scott's most updated hitters list, including his positional rankings coming soon. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, joined by senior analyst Scott Chu. We're talking hitters on Pitcher List. Scott, you published your top 300 hitters for 2026 in February. We're now creeping into March, and you've got some movement in the list. Some guys that have fluctuated up and down. Let's talk some of the risers early on. Who have you got that's been creeping up your ranks?
Yeah, so let's start with the guys who are in the top 150. The biggest mover is actually guy we just got done talking about. That's Jac Cagalione. And so I want to put a little bit more of a positive spin. He's shown us a ton of power here so far in the spring. That's really promising. Like the ranks, I don't change at this point. I don't change my ranks much for spring training unless I think it's a role change. And while it's possible Cagalione will be platooned, like we just talked about, I also now think there's about an equal chance that doesn't last long and that he can be 130, 140 game guy right now where it's only tough lefties, right? But they don't take him out for every single left-handed pitcher they see, right? Ones that are vulnerable, I hope they leave him in. So that increased role and just the power upside, right? He struggled with a couple things last season when he hit the major leagues, but strikeouts weren't one of them. It wasn't that he couldn't make contact. In fact, he had a fine barrel rate as well. It's just that when he didn't barrel it, it wasn't good, right? He had too many ground balls, 50% ground balls when he was in the majors last season. Again, because that's the same thing we were talking about with McGonigle, where he was a 40 to 45% ground ball guy in the minors. And when he got to the majors, it turns to 50% because stuff that used to be line drives turn into ground balls, right? That type of batted ball, the line drive, that's the one with the most volatility because the difference between a line drive and a fly ball and a line drive and a ground ball is incredibly little. You get to the majors, the pitches move more. So you expect that ground ball rate to go up for a lot of hitters and that line drive rate to come down. That's what we saw. But I do think he can make some adjustments and get back to something more reasonable. And hey, look, when Cagalione has a breakout season, and I like to think that he will eventually. When he does, that's a 30 home run bat. Now, the question is, what kind of 30 home run bat? Is it like a Spencer Torkelson 30 home run bat, which is valuable, but a bit flawed? Or is it like another level of player who can maybe hit for a higher average just rip the ball everywhere because he's not going to strike out as much as a guy like Spencer Torkelson? I don't know. That part we still have to see, but there is certainly upside here, and I love him at the back of my outfield in 12-team leagues.
Do you think he can make kind of that that rapid ascension in the way that we saw maybe like Gunnar Henderson from his cup of coffee to his rookie of the year season, where the Orioles kind of let him hit against lefties and he actually had success, where the previous narrative was he can't hit lefties. And then the Orioles didn't let him hit lefties, and then he couldn't hit lefties because he hadn't seen lefties. Do you think that's kind of what we're seeing with Cagalione here in Kansas City?
Maybe a little, but this is where understanding, I think, some I'm not a huge prospect guy, but I do look at those grades a lot. And I think that's where you have to tell the difference. It's not just that Gunnar Henderson was like a 1.1 prospect, best prospect in baseball. It's that he had a very advanced hit tool. And so with that advanced hit tool, these guys can make adjustments a lot better, right? They can start making more contact. Cagalione does not have a great hit tool. It is below average to average at best. What he's got is power and a whole bunch of it, right? And so he's never going to walk a ton. Like he kind of could walk at, like a 10% rate in the minors, but I don't think that'll ever be what he does in the majors. I think he'll always be like an average walk rate guy. But, the reason he's exciting is because this dude has 12 batted balls in spring training. And the average exit velocity on those 12 batted balls is 98.8 miles an hour. On average, it's a missile. All right. Like he's got a max EV so far this spring of 120 miles an hour. That's ludicrous. Max exit velocity. That's like if someone were to hit that in April, that might be the hardest hit ball for the entire month of April in the major leagues, right? Like that's Giancarlo Stanton, O'Neal Cruz kind of power. So that's where the excitement comes from, but he doesn't have that kind of advanced hit tool. It may take some time where I don't think lefties will necessarily strike him out all the time. I do think lefties will cause him to hit the ball in the dirt a lot, right? And that's going to be really frustrating because even last season, the strikeout rate against lefties and righties was exactly the same. Right. And actually he had some okay numbers against lefties last year. He was bad all around, but I think they expect it to get better against righties and they're not so sure against lefties. And the ground ball rate is where it was really different because you might look at the stat line for Cagalione and say, oh, well, he was actually better against lefties than righties. Is this, he had a 36 WRC plus against righties and a 71 against lefties. So he was only normal bad against lefties. So why are you so worried about lefties? Because if you go and look at the batted ball, like the batted ball profile against righties is normal, right? 17.9% line drive rate, 44.6% ground ball rate, 37.5% fly ball rate. That's fine. That it's not great, but that's fine. Against lefties, it's a 63% ground ball rate. Like that's not workable because he ain't fast. Like he's not gonna like beat these, his infield hit rate is like 2%, right? He's not going to beat these out. So you need him to get the ball in the air. And if he's not getting the ball in the air, he is a sandbag to your lineup. You are hoping that thing finds a hole. So with Cagalione, I think that he can win that full-time role. He's just got to get the ball in the air against lefties because he's not going to strike out a bunch against them. But yeah, it's just massive, massive power. And I knew he had that, but I didn't know, again, only 12 batted balls, but my goodness, 98.8 miles an hour on those 12 batted balls, 120 that max exit velocity of 120.2. There are very few players in the major leagues who can do that in batting practice.
Well, Cagalione will be a guy that I certainly keep my eye on as a second-year breakout, or really still rookie eligible, I believe. So certainly a guy in the heart of that Royals lineup to keep an eye on, especially looking for power in the middle parts of your draft. Anybody else rising up the ranks for you, Scott? Maybe somebody who's performed well in the World Baseball Classic, or anybody in general?
If I was going to raise a guy up for the World Baseball Classic, it would be Jarren Duran, who's smacked 3 home runs so far, which is really cool. But also, I'm not a huge believer in that. I think some of the guys who rose up, Konnor Griffin did rise up in the ranks. He rose up about 34 spots. So Cagalione rose up 38 spots. Konnor Griffin rose up 34 spots. He's someone who, just again, he looks pretty legit. I think the Pirates are going to let you give him a shot. There's some rules now that we have where if they win Rookie of the Year, basically you can still kind of keep the control that you have. So he's one that moved up quite a bit. Michael Harris rose 13 spots, just again, because he's got a much more solid role now. I don't think they're going to jerk him around if he has a slow start, which, if you'll recall, he's always had. Like after his rookie season, it's been all super slow starts that turn into platoons and all other kind of ugliness. I don't even think Atlanta has the option to do that. So they're not. So that moved him up a little bit. Another guy who moved up a fair bit considering where he was in the ranks is James Wood. And part of that is just because I think I was too harsh on him. I know he's got these decision-making problems, but I think he can work them out. And in spring training, again, the results are bad. The plate discipline is fine so far, right? And again, that can change a lot. It's 20, it's 20 plate appearances. That's all we see. But I think this Nationals team's a little scrappier than I thought it would be. I think James Wood, he's going to be hitting second for them, I think. And, maybe I think really I was just too hard on him. And I had to remember for the first half of the season, I had this guy as a borderline top 10 hitter, right? James Wood his ceiling is like tier 2, right? Like his ceiling is first round guy, starting next year. So he moved up, and that's where sometimes these ranks, people are like, well, nothing's really changed. I'm like, well, I've changed, me, the human, right? Like I've been in drafts and I find myself moving James Wood up, and I would started to take him, or like I took him in some mocks. I took him in just a friends league. And I was like, why do I rank him this way? Right. And that's something that's going to happen if you're doing mocks. One of the biggest things you get out of it is you have your ranks and you feel good about them. And then when it's time to pick, you don't follow them. And you ask yourself, why? Is it because I don't need that position? Is it because I don't need what that guy provides? Or is it like, I might actually like this guy more than I thought I did, or maybe not as much as I thought I did.
Well, you talk about spring training performances and how that can kind of weigh, not necessarily weigh on the way that you draft, but at least reveal some of the things you're looking for, like you said, with plate discipline with James Wood. Have there been any other observations you've made through spring training that have kind of popped off the page for you?
Well, the first thing to mention is that for veterans, I do not care about their spring training numbers. And I think the guy to talk about there is Matt McClain, who is having just an unbelievable, he's having an unbelievable spring training. His OPS is like 1.7 something. And I posted this on Twitter at some point last week. We've seen him be good for 25 at-bats before, right? We've seen Matt McClain do that. I mean, he actually started last season. He hit like 3 home runs in the first week or something, right? Matt McClain, we know that's in there. The problem is that it doesn't come out nearly enough, right? So that's why I'm not so excited about Matt McClain and moving him up my ranks, because I'm still concerned that long-term he's not going to perform. I think a guy who's a little bit more interesting, at this point, what I'm looking at when I'm looking at these spring training stats, I'm like, who might be winning themselves a bigger role, right? Who might be solidifying a role for their team? So it's good to see Kobe Mayo come out and hit well in spring training, right? Because he's going to have an opportunity early in the season, and maybe maybe it's a very strong opportunity, right? They won't mess with him. Maybe, Mike Yastrzemski has this opportunity he's got 4 home runs now in spring training, and they have this open spot and they don't have a lot of competition, period. But maybe they were thinking about platooning him. But if he continues to hit well, Yastrzemski, in spring training, maybe they're like, well, maybe we just let him run, right? Because the other guys on the bench aren't that good. So that's an opportunity. Or, Jos Nixon Garcia, the password for Pittsburgh, he's hitting well this postseason or this spring training. And while that doesn't necessarily, like, I don't see him being a starter. There's another young outfielder I think they'd prefer to give a starting role to when he's ready for it. I do think it makes him, especially in deep leagues, interesting as a guy who is sort of like gonna start at least with some platoon, and then maybe he does creep his way into some more plate appearances, right? Especially if there's an injury. That's the only problem, is that Brandon Lowe and Brian Reynolds and Marcelo Ozuna at DH and O'Neal Cruz in center, they're probably going to lock down most of those at bats. But Jos Nixon Garcia is showing enough to potentially find a way to make a bigger impact on this team.
Well, we've talked about some spring training performers. We've talked about some guys that have risen up your list. Is there anybody else that you wanted to mention before we go to break?
Yeah, Brett, there is one more guy. Begrudgingly, this dude keeps ending up on all my drafts, so he's moved himself into the top 150, and it's Willi freaking Castro. And it's not because there's been any change, like there's not been any like reevaluation of his talent. I don't think I was wrong about what Willi Castro is. What I was wrong about is how useful that is when you're actually in a draft and you realize you've got a week. I just in TGFBI realized I still needed an outfielder, a corner infielder, and a middle infielder. And in a deep league, it's like, oh crap, Willi Castro can be all of those things. I can take him and then see in the next few rounds, and we'll talk about draft strategy shortly, but it's like in the next few rounds, I don't have to reach up and grab, oh, I have to go get a middle infielder now. I have to go get an outfielder now. I can see where the value kind of is for the rest of the draft. So it's annoyingly convenient to have Willi Castro later in the draft, or to a lesser extent, Jonathan India, who I think might benefit from the Walls coming in a little bit in Kansas City. He's got a similar sort of eligibility. It keeps happening, and I hate myself for it. But also, I'm willing to admit that Willi Castro is more convenient than I originally assumed. Now, again, in a standard Yahoo league, which 3 outfield, no middle infield, no corner infield, just a 2 utility, he's not really going to have room. He's going to be a guy like, maybe you draft him because you want just one bench hitter and he can cover a lot of ground. But when it comes to, when it comes to those deeper leagues where you have that, like those big rosters, being able to check off corner, middle, and outfield is a big deal. And Willi Castro moved up a bit specifically for that reason.
Yeah, Castro, you might scoff at this, but in my TGFBI draft, I didn't get Willi Castro because he went in the 16th round. And that's like 3 rounds below. I'm looking at other utility guys. Ernie Clement went in the 19th, 3 rounds later than Willi Castro. So I am in on Willi Castro. I have proclaimed my love for Willi Castro on several episodes of this podcast, but man, putting him up in the 16th round, is that price something you're willing to pay, or is that too expensive?
I am absolutely certain I know what happened. It's the same thing I just described. Somebody realized they had weaknesses at several positions, and there's not a lot of guys that can cover all of those bases, so to speak. So, he's not ever going to show up on like the biggest risers and fallers for like ADP differences and stuff like that. But he is a guy who, again, you're just going to be like, hey, you know what? This might be kind of useful. He's a starter. He has very little competition. Again, it's been like a sort of a bit of a creep up, like after he got his job in Colorado, he's kind of just slowly had his ADP kind of settle in. But yeah, he's not special. His eligibility is, which is mean to kind of separate. Like he's not going to do something with the bat that we're like, oh my God, we're so happy to have this. He's good enough to cover a lot of spots in deep leagues.
I'm glad you're finally buying into Willi Castro. Makes my heart happy. Very excited to see him play in Colorado. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk draft strategy and different draft formats on Hacks and Jacks. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, joined by Scott Chu. And before we dive into drafts and draft strategies, we need to talk about our live draft assistant here on Pitcher List. The PL Live Draft Assistant, or LDA, as you'll hear it referred to through the industry. Nick will call it that. The LDA is fully updated and ready for 2026, and we've completely overhauled it for your drafts. Think of it as having a personal scout, an analyst, a master strategist, a Nick Pollock, a Scott Chu sitting right next to you as you draft. A lot of new features, a fully integrated PLV 2.0 projections. There's a more streamlined system of entering your picks. There's new player tags, which are awesome as you go through your prep. You can tag guys as sleepers, as targets, as your do not draft list. You can kind of preset things that way as you go through. It's a beautiful new system, and it's definitely something that if you're a PL Plus or PL Pro subscriber, you should absolutely be utilizing. Draft Assistant is available with a PL Pro subscription if you want support. If you want to support Pitcher List at the highest level, lifetime subs are still open for a limited time. Dominate your draft with our live draft assistant. Use promo code PODCASTLDA15 when you sign up. So super exciting tool, and it helps you navigate through all kinds of different draft formats, Scott. And we're here to talk about kind of the nuance between those formats. Obviously, you have your roto leagues, your category leagues, your head-to-head category leagues, and then, of course, head-to-head points. Let's start with roto. Let's talk about kind of the different draft strategies and things that you look for in a roto draft that might be different from your head-to-head categories league or your head-to-head points league. Let's start with 5x5 and then you kind of expand on that as we go.
Yeah. So the big thing with roto that makes it different from the other formats is that all your stats matter for the entire season, right? In all of the head-to-head formats, you have a fresh slate every single week, right? Roto, that's not the case. So it creates a little bit of tension that doesn't exist in the others, where streaky hitters matter less in Roto, because all you matter is that when it comes out through the wash, what does the number look like, right? You don't care as much about the weekly ebb and flow, right? You need to avoid, on the pitching side, it's a little different because you need to avoid some of those craters, because that point 2 innings, 9 earned runs never comes off the ledger in Roto. You're stuck with it the whole year. So it's a big deal. Whereas again, in a head-to-head league, you're like, well, that really sucked this week. We'll get them next week, right? Like, it doesn't matter anymore. That start no longer matters. It cannot ever hurt you again. And in Roto, it stabs you in the kidney every single day up until the end of the season. So that's where you have to think about it a little bit. So with hitters, it usually works out the other way. You're like, you don't really care that Kyle Schwarber has 2 or 3 weeks consistently where he's terrible. You're like, just leave him in because I don't want to miss the good week, right? Because I get to keep those numbers the whole time. I get to let it come out in the wash. Hitters can't blow you up negatively like pitchers can in Roto. So, they can't lose you a week, right? Because you don't care about a week. You care about a season. So that's a big deal in Roto. Also, it puts a lot more value on steals and ratios than you have in head-to-head category leagues. Because again, you have to keep that number for the entire season and then get your points based on what you have. It's not like I have to worry about how much my opponent is doing. It's that I have to be better than everybody in these categories. And so when you look at a 5x5 Roto, stolen bases is 20% of your hitting value, but also doesn't really correlate with the other stats, right? Like there's not very strong correlations between stolen base and anything else. It's like a little bit for runs, but these guys often, like a lot of base stealers don't bat first, right? They bat like ninth. So they don't always score a ton of runs. And it puts this heavy emphasis on stolen bases. And that's why when you listen to folks that talk a lot of NFBC, especially when there's an overall component, you listen to these guys, they will talk about stolen bases a lot. And in every draft, you'll hear them say, but where's the speed, right? Like a friend of mine, Tim McLeod, who's been doing this a long time, great analyst, he'll be the first, like in a draft, if, when we're doing like industry drafts, one of the first things he'll kind of ask about a team is like, where's the speed? How are they going to get the stolen bases? They're hard to get on the wire. It's easier than it used to be, but it's still difficult. And you're not going to accidentally win a week like you will in head to head. So with Roto, you care about that. You also, you do care about ratios because they're harder to rebuild and they're less fluky, right? Week to week, Kyle Schwarber can win you batting average for a week because he'll go a week and hit 600, right? He can do that. It's just all the other weeks where he doesn't, right? That'll never happen in Roto. So in Roto, you really care about these ratios a lot more because, again, they stay with you the entire season. And so in Roto, I'm much more likely to attack ratios earlier in the draft. They are really hard to get later. And when they do appear later, it tends to be empty average, right? Think like Luis Arias. And that's not even late. Like you get after that, you start talking about like a Chase Mydroth, who in Roto just doesn't carry a lot of value because he didn't really do anything except hit, right? Which sounds like, well, he hits. Isn't that good? Well, not when it's all singles, right? Like singles and doubles in Roto don't really matter unless there's a bunch of dudes on base, right? Like it's not as important. So yeah, with Roto, you're always playing the long game. It makes trades quite interesting, right? Like it's a lot more obvious what people's strengths and weaknesses are. Trades are probably the easiest in Roto, right? Because you can also make up the most ground. You can go from, 8th to 2nd, right? You can't always go from last to first. It's possible, but you can't always do that. But you can move a lot, right? Without having to do much. In a head-to-head league, you have to win that category every week, right? And it doesn't actually matter what categories you win. It doesn't really matter how you got the points, right? In Roto, it does. So in Roto, you get this layer of strategy about like, okay, there's 5 of us who are all within 10 stolen bases of each other. and we've got 2 months to go, right? That's a lot of volatility, right? Because you can lose 5 of your standing points because they steal a few more bases than you do. It also gives you a reason to say, like, okay, so how am I going to move up the rankings? I can literally just look at it and see, like, okay, these are the categories where I have the most like that are the closest for me to move up, right? Like the distance between me and the next guy on home runs is insurmountable, right? I'm second, he's first, but he's got all the power in the world. I'm never going to catch him. So I don't care about that anymore. Where are the categories I can catch, right? And that I won't lose points, right? If I'm that guy that's first in home runs all the way up, or let's say I'm first in stolen bases by like 40, which is just insane. You'd be like, oh, well, I mean, no one's going to catch me. I can trade all the speed. I can just trade it off and get stuff that I still need. So trades become a little more natural in Roto. So anyway, in draft strategy, if it's a no trade league, you need to be balancing everything all the time. It is very Roto with no trading is the hardest to deal with punting in draft, right? And just to be clear, when we talk about punting, we mean punting in the draft. We don't mean punting all season necessarily, right? We mean punting in the draft. Like saying, I know this is not enough steals to win, but I can still go find those, right? Or I've got one closer. That is enough to put me in last place, but I'm willing to spend fab on it instead of draft resources to get the rest of my saves. Especially in the 12-team league, that's super viable. In a 15, it's a bit harder, but it can be done, right? So that's the other thing I would call out. I'll use Roto to do it, but don't think of punting as I'm punting this on the season. You are punting it in the draft, right? And it means that you will probably spend your fab resources to make up for it. But that's fine. That's a decision you can make. One that you'll probably make at some point in the middle-ish rounds where you're like, hey, look, the cost of going to get more saves right now and the hitting I'm not going to be able to get if I do that isn't worth it. I'd rather spend the fab. That's a totally viable thing as long as you're thinking about it in that way. Yeah, so with Roto, again, it's how it's all season. It's more of a grind. It's avoiding, on the pitching side, avoiding blowups, but more importantly, on the hitting side, not sweating the slumps. You got to let them play through for the players that you know are good. And you can't just do the burn and churn as much because the more you keep missing, the more their bad stats pile up on you. And maybe the guy that you originally had that you believed in has turned it around by now. You just don't get the clean slate. But as we talk about head-to-head categories, which is just Roto, but weekly against one person, the strategy changes immensely because what matters, there's 2 kinds of head-to-head category leagues. There's the ones where there's a single win and it's whoever gets the most categories gets the one win, or you've got the much, much more common, you get a point for every category that you win. The other guy gets a point for every category that they win. And by the end, we see who has the most wins and who has the most losses. The biggest change from Roto to head-to-head is punting no longer is just in draft. You can just punt on the whole season, right? Like stolen bases are incredibly fluky week to week. You hear me say it all the time, right? There are roughly 25 to 26 scoring periods in a season. Very few players average more than one a week. And even though they average more than one a week, there are plenty of weeks where they get 1 or 0. And then they have a week where they get 4 or 5, right? So you can have a really strong team for stolen bases overall and still lose that matchup a bunch of times because your guys didn't steal bases that week, right? And then it's a wipe clean slate. Whereas in Roto, you're banking all those saves. In head-to-head categories, it's week to week. So you become much more flexible, especially with saves and steals, right? Number 1, with average, with ratios, batting average doesn't stabilize in anywhere close to a 1-week span, right? Batting average from week to week is insanely fluky, right? So I care about it a lot less, right? I don't actively avoid drafting batting average or OBP, but I care about it considerably less because it's really fluky. The other thing is saves and steals. So I'll talk a little bit less about saves because it's not our forte, but the first thing I do is I look at the other guy's roster. I look at the other team I'm playing and saying, is it worth it to try to chase them in steals? Like, oh, they've got Chandler, Simpson and all this, and I've got like nobody. Yeah, it's not worth it. Right. But maybe it's a week where I'm like, hey, actually my guys are going to, they're going to go play, historically it's been like the White Sox who just don't throw out runners like ever. Everybody runs on them, or, the old Mets back in the day. I might be like, hey, you know what? Maybe my wire pickup will be for a steals guy. I think I can catch him in steals because I'm going to have good opportunities, and maybe they don't. Or maybe we were already kind of close and I'm like, oh, one more gives me the edge. So you do a lot more week to week managing because you can sort of queue up against your opponent. In the draft, you can also make the decision of, wow, everybody's pushing saves or steals way up. I'm just not going to do that, because what if I can go, if I go 7-3 every week, I'm the best team in this league, right? If I can go 6-4 every week, I'm probably making the playoffs, right? At least. So head-to-head categories, just a different strategy in that you can take some categories and be like, yeah, I don't care about that as much, and adjust your ranks accordingly. The ranks between those two really aren't that different, except, again, it's specific categories. You can start saying like, I don't care about this category as much. So it's no longer as much of a penalty. So I'll push that guy up a little bit, right? Because it's not going to hurt me all the time. It's going to hurt me a week or two at a time. And the other is, you can just say like, oh, I just don't care about this at all, right? I don't care about steals. That means Chandler Simpson's off my board, right? He just doesn't do enough of anything else. I just don't care. Or, really saves and steals are the only two you want to do it with. Now, in both of these formats, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you start changing the categories. I was talking about 5x5 there. Once you start adding categories, so if you just replace average with OBP, make sure you understand the difference and what a good OBP is. I think this is something that gets left out, where someone will say, oh, his OBP is better than his average, but is it still good? Right? Or you'll say, oh, Luis Arias has a really good OBP. I should value him. Actually, Luis Arias is much less valuable in OBP because his OBP is just like pretty good. It's, it's a plus, but his batting average is like a triple plus, right? He doesn't walk that much. His high OBP is almost entirely driven by his batting average. So him and a guy like Steven Kwan lose a bunch of value because they're not giving you all this extra value in batting average that they would have. They're giving you like a slight bump in OBP. It's almost like if they only had a, slightly above average batting average, how interesting would they be? Not that interesting. So make sure you understand how that jumps. It's generally, you're looking in a 12-team league, you're probably looking, it's not a good OBP till you're looking at like 340, right? You don't want to say a guy is a good OBP until it's like 340 and above. Whereas with batting average, it's like 270. And up, you'll say, okay, that's pretty good. 280. That means they're boosting my average and not bringing it down. Again, in OBP, that number in a 12-team league is probably closer to like 340. Now, that's just when you swap a category, right? That's fairly easy to conceptualize. The other thing you need to know is that when you start adding categories, things start changing, right? So let's talk about home runs and stolen bases as a good example of this phenomenon. With home runs in a 5x5 league, a home run gives you a boost in 4 of the 5 categories, right? It's a hit, so that's average. It's a small boost to average, but it is a boost. It's a run. It's a home run. It's at least 1 RBI, right? So you get a boost in all those categories. So 4 of 5, 80% of your score sheet is affected by a home run. When you go to 6x6, if all you did was add OBP, then power's now still just as strong, right? It's still covering almost everything. But when you start adding in categories like doubles, triples, you start adding in, depending on the categories you add in, home runs become either more or less valuable. Like I was just talking to someone who has a league where they count doubles and triples, those are 2 categories, and they don't count RBI, which means that's now you took away a category that home runs were helping you in, and you added 2 more that home runs don't contribute to. So now home run hitters are slightly less valuable than they were before. And guys who are mostly valuable because they hit home runs, they get a bigger hit, right? That'd be like the Kyle Schwarbers of the world. They get a bigger hit because it's like, oh, I don't care about his RBI anymore. The home runs aren't quite as valuable because they're not boosting as many stats, because home runs have strong correlations with the other stats. It's also possible and much more likely when it comes to power that you're adding categories that are just making home runs even more valuable, right? So when you start adding in, like I've got home runs already on there, and now I'm adding slug and or OPS, right? It's like, okay, so even more points. So if I'm using, OPS instead of batting average, I'm actually double rewarding power, right? Because it was a slight boost to batting average, but no more of a batting average than any other hit. When you look at like an OPS, it's way better, right? You get a huge boost. So when you start bringing in some of those ratios, power becomes a lot more important. So try to understand if you're using a non-standard set of categories, try to understand how power matters, because that'll change how your rankings work a lot. And use something like the live draft assistant or, again, the auction calculator of your choice to understand how projections will move guys around and adjust your rankings accordingly. The other thing to understand is speed. Power has the most correlation between the other standard categories, right? Because it directly impacts them. Stolen bases has the least correlation with the other categories, has the least correlation with runs, RBI, batting average. It's like a little bit for runs and doesn't really correlate to anything else. So it's 20% of your ledger in a standard 5x5. When you go 6x6, it's like 17 something percent, right? It's like 1/6, 16%, I think. You get to 7x7, you're like 15%, just less than that. You go to 8x8, you're talking 12%. Speed becomes less and less important, becomes easier and easier to punt, right? Like, why am I spending all these resources to boost what was 20? I'll do it for 20% of my scoring in a categories league. I'm not going to do it for 16, right? I'm not going to do it. Yeah, that's not nearly as valuable now because I can go get a home run and it counts towards way more stats, right? It's even more. Power is now way more important than speed, whereas before it was just mostly more important, right? So that's the dynamic that happens there when you start adding in categories. So keep that in mind. And finally, I'll move to points. And, I know, Brett, you're going to be working on a points column. I think, one of the biggest things with points is you just have to stop caring. The biggest difference is in Roto and categories, you absolutely care how your team is performing in each individual stat. And point says, I don't care how I get them, right? So generally speaking, and again, points leagues each one of them is its own beautiful snowflake and everybody tweaks everything. But the biggest difference you'll find is you care a lot more in points about like doubles and total bases, right? Because you no longer like 2 doubles is as good as a home run in points, right? Whereas in Roto and head-to-head categories, 2 doubles is not as good as a home run, right? Because 2 doubles might not have led to any runs or RBI, where a home run absolutely did. So, it's not that different, but still, it's really important to kind of understand that. I think the other thing that you do in points, and that I often tell people when they ask me for advice in points, they're like, oh, how should I value these guys? Compare what a single and a stolen base is worth to a double, right? Compare what those two are, because I think you'll find in a lot of cases it's about the same, right? Or pretty close. Like maybe it's 3 points for the single and the steal and 2 points for a double. In those cases, I don't care about speed at all. It's way easier to find doubles than it is steals, right? So I'm going to go get the doubles and I'm going to attack guys who put the ball in play. I actually don't always want, Kyle Schwarber is better, can be very good in points, but he doesn't put a ton of balls in play. It's just very nice that every time he does, it leaves the yard. Other guys like these extreme power hitters who have like a 10% walk rate and a 30% strikeout rate, they can be very frustrating in points, even if you don't have a strikeout penalty, because they're not putting the ball in play. And all of their outs are sort of unproductive outs, whereas guys who are smacking the ball around the field, they have a better chance to drive in runners. I'd rather have a guy with like a 5% walk rate and a 20% strikeout rate than a 10 and a 30, right? Even though like overall it's about the same, I want those balls in play because they matter more in points because they just keep base runners moving. So that's the biggest thing with points. Is the most important tool in points is a live draft assistant, an auction calculator, something that gives you an idea, and use whatever. I love our projections. Use whatever projections you want. Okay. Have a projection. Do not take my rankings into your points league draft. All right. If you do, you can do it for the blurbs to talk about what I think a guy is going to be like. But for God's sake, get a projection system and run your league scoring through it to find out what players are worth what, right? And throw regular ADP right out the window. Points leagues just don't align to those And so you can take the concept of, I think this player is going to get better. I think this player is going to struggle with this. It's going to struggle with that. But also just take the projections, use that as your baseline, use other like you can use my rankings then to be like, well, Scott really likes this guy. He thinks he's going to take a step, he thinks Riley Green's going to take a step forward on the strikeout. So maybe I can bump him up a little bit more because maybe this projection is a little too harsh on the strikeout rate. Do things like that, but start with the projection and plug in how your league does scoring and then see how it goes. Obviously that's valuable in every format. It's way more valuable in points than it is everywhere else.
Absolutely. I know we talked about the LDA quite a bit, during this formatting talk, but that's one of my favorite things to use the LDA for is my points leagues, where I can take the values of each category, plug them in, and have it spit out projected points based on the PLV projections. And that's huge for me as I draft prep, because I can look and see, it's got Riley Green. He's projected to be outfield. He's ranked as outfielder 12, but based on these point projections, he's down here at outfielder 20. So he's a guy that I'm going to be avoiding in points drafts, because of the strikeout penalty, because when he puts the ball in play, he puts it out of the yard and doesn't really put it in play other than that. So
yeah. And I think the other thing you just have to do in a points league is understand the balance between pitching and hitting. That's the apart from the projections, understanding the balance between pitching and hitting in a points league is absolutely critical, because generally speaking, in most points leagues, all the highest scorers are pitchers, right? But there's also a lot more of them and they all score a bunch of points, and you can stream pitchers. I mean, streaming pitchers in points is a must strategy. It used to be a niche thing. It is a must. Everybody streams pitchers in points. So just because they score more points doesn't necessarily mean you should take all the pitchers first before you take the hitters. Because what you actually care about is that sort of that replacement level concept of how many more points does this guy make than the replacement level guy, right? Like a standard, like a volume, just like a boring old volume starter is not so interesting in points because it's like, I can stream that, right? I can get all that back. What I can't, what's harder is maybe on the hitting side, because once you start looking at bad hitters, you're like, oh, wow, these guys all strike out too much. They don't get me enough points. They're real sandbags, especially at like catcher. You start going to the back of the catcher list and you're like, wow, these dudes all hit 200. They're possibly negatives. That's something that's really important to do. So understand the balance between pitching and hitting, and, whether you need to load up, in standard categories leagues. I've said it, for several weeks now, load up on hitting early, right? Go get those hitters. Those first 5 rounds, I don't think you can take 3 pitchers in the first 5 rounds right now. You've got to get some of the hitters that are in that range. But in a points league, it's totally different, right? Because it just depends. If your league has a ton of bonuses for like quality start and innings and, all that stuff, then go get the pitchers, because those guys run out quick. The guys who throw 6 innings every time, they disappear instantly. So you got to go get them. Whereas, I don't necessarily care that they get a quality start as much, right? Like, it matters. It's probably a stat, but it's just the one stat, right? It's not worth more than all the other stats. Whereas like a bonus for a quality start might be 10 points, right? It might be 5 points. It matters way more, right? Like, it's literally worth more. So make sure you understand the balances there.
Beautiful. That does it for our formats discussion, our draft strategies discussion. Make sure you check out my column. It'll be coming out, I believe, on Fridays. It'll be talking about points leagues. We're juicing up our points leagues content. We're increasing that this year based on pitcher list user feedback. So we're taking what the fans have said. We're trying to act on it and improve the fan experience on pitcher list. That's what it's all about. Scott, great episode. Good job talking us through a whole bunch of different stuff. I feel like we covered so much ground this week. Let the people know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, still on Twitter at If the Chu Fits, still on Blue Sky, scottchu.pitcherlist.com. And I'm releasing the positional ranks as we speak. Now, you already know them to an extent because I have the top 300. What these will have is also, it'll have a foreword by our own Nate Schwartz, who should be on the pod next week to talk about some hitting stuff if we can still get him. And it'll also have a table at the bottom much like Nick's ranks, it has a table. I will give you a table for each positional rank. They should be out in the next few days. So if you want something that you can copy and paste into your own spreadsheets, it'll be there for you. It won't be behind any kind of paywall. You'll be able to get those positionally.
Beautiful. You can find me at Fade That Man on social media. I'm obviously in the Pitcher List Discord. I'll be writing a weekly column on Pitcher List. I'll be here on Hacks and Jacks. Make sure to check out QBList.com as well. It's the fantasy football sister site of Pitcher List. I'll be contributing over there throughout the course of the year, helping Jay Felicio with some podcasts, as well as updating a top 25 free agents column as the offseason continues, which I don't know if you've kept an eye on the football news, Scott, but the free agent market is absolutely bananas. And it's not even the official start of the league year yet. So
we've already got canceled trades. I
don't want to talk about it. I'm a huge Ravens fan, as you can see. And they just decided that Max Crosby wasn't healthy enough to be wearing purple on Sundays. So I'm still a little salty about it, but we'll see how the rest of the offseason progresses for the Ravens. Anyway, enough football talk. We'll get back to baseball on our next episode of Hacks and Jacks. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.